In 1997, Brooklyn Brawler stood across the ring from Shawn Michaels for the WWF World Championship at Madison Square Garden. For one night, the guy who lost to everyone got his shot at greatness. This is the man who spent 3 decades losing on purpose to make other wrestlers look like stars. He trained with Arnold Skarland, worked with Hulk Hogan, and helped build the careers of countless WWE legends. The question wrestling fans are asking is simple. Does a man who sacrificed his career to build others deserve a place in the Hall of Fame? Growing up in working-class Brooklyn, Steve Lombardi understood that life meant taking hits and getting back up. He studied biochemistry at St. Francis College, but left school to pursue wrestling, a decision that made no sense to anyone who knew him. His family expected him to graduate and find a good job with benefits and security. Wrestling wasn't even a career to them. Wrestling wasn't on his radar until he started watching matches at Madison Square Garden. Something about the spectacle grabbed him and wouldn't let go. He saw guys like Bruno Sammartino and Pedro Morales connecting with crowds in ways that seemed almost magical. These weren't just athletes performing moves, they were telling stories that made grown men cheer and cry. Lombardi found himself studying their movements, their timing, their ability to control thousands of people with a single gesture. The more he watched, the more obsessed he became. He started going to smaller shows in the area, watching local wrestlers work in front of tiny crowds in high school gyms and community centers. These guys weren't famous. Most of them would never make it to television, but they had something that fascinated him. They were living completely different lives than everyone else he knew. While his college classmates worried about exams and job interviews, these wrestlers were learning how to fall without getting hurt and how to make fake punches look real. His family thought he was going through a phase. Wrestling was entertainment, not a career. His professors reminded him about his grades and his potential in biochemistry. But Lombardi couldn't focus on molecular structures and chemical equations anymore. He was thinking about ring psychology and crowd reactions. He started skipping classes to attend wrestling shows. His grades began to slip. The decision felt inevitable. Lombardi told his family he was going to become a professional wrestler. They thought he had lost his mind. Here was a smart kid with a real future, throwing it all away for something that wasn't even a real sport. His friends from college couldn't understand it. His neighborhood buddies thought he was crazy. Starting over meant learning everything from scratch. Wrestling training wasn't like college classes where you could study the material and take tests. It was about getting thrown around by guys who had been doing this for years. Every day meant new bruises and new ways to get hurt. The other trainees were mostly younger guys who had been athletes in high school. Lombardi was older, coming from an academic background, trying to catch up with people who understood physical competition in ways he never had. The trainers didn't care about his college education or his family's expectations. They cared about whether he could take a bump without complaining and whether he could make other wrestlers look good. That meant learning how to lose convincingly, how to sell moves, how to make the crowd believe he was really hurt when he wasn't. It wasn't glamorous work. Most days he went home wondering if he had made a terrible mistake. But something about the Brooklyn streets had prepared him for this in ways he didn't expect. The toughness was already there. Wrestling just gave him a way to use it. He paid his dues on house shows throughout New York, Connecticut, and New Jersey, learning the psychology of selling and making his opponents look like stars. The Northeastern Independent Circuit taught him that success wasn't measured in victories, but in how well you could make other people look good. The training was brutal, and the pay was almost nothing. He worked small shows, learning his craft in front of crowds that sometimes numbered in the 20s. Veterans would tell him stories about making it to the big leagues, but most of them never did. The business was full of broken dreams and broken bodies. Yet Lombardi kept showing up, kept taking the punishment, kept trying to get better. By 1983, after years of grinding through tiny venues, Steve Lombardi finally got the call. The World Wrestling Federation wanted him. On July 15, 1983, he made his WWE debut in Queens, losing to Swede Hansen. He thought this was his big break, his chance to prove that walking away from biochemistry had been worth it. He had no idea he was about to learn the most difficult skill in professional wrestling. Arnold Scarland and Mr. Saito taught Lombardi match psychology and selling, the core skills that let him elevate opponents on TV. Scarland had trained Bruno Sammartino and managed Andre the Giant. So when he worked with newcomers like Lombardi, he focused on the fundamentals that most wrestling schools never covered. How to take a punch and make it look devastating. How to fall from a body slam and make the crowd believe you were hurt. How to stumble around the ring like you were in real trouble while still being able to continue the match. Mr. Saito brought a different perspective to Lombardi's education. The Japanese wrestling legend understood timing in ways that American trainers often missed. He showed Lombardi that selling wasn't just about looking hurt. It was about controlling the pace of the match through your reactions. When to collapse immediately and when to fight through the pain. When to show fear and when to show determination. Every facial expression had to tell part of the story. The Northeastern Independent Circuit became Lombardi's real classroom. Places like the Westchester County Center and high school gyms in Connecticut weren't glamorous venues, but they were perfect laboratories for learning enhancement work. The crowds were small enough that every reaction mattered. If Lombardi didn't sell a move convincingly, everyone in the building could tell. If he tried to get himself over instead of his opponent, the promoter would notice and he wouldn't get booked again. Night after night, Lombardi absorbed punishment from wrestlers who were trying to make their own names. He learned that different opponents required different approaches to selling. Against power wrestlers, he had to make their moves look devastating through impact and aftermath. With technical wrestlers, he needed to show the cumulative effect of holds and submissions. High-flying opponents demanded reactions that emphasized speed and surprise. Each match became a master class in making someone else look unstoppable. The psychology went deeper than just physical reactions. Lombardi discovered that his job was to be the audience's surrogate in the ring. When fans saw him getting beaten up, they needed to feel sympathy for him while simultaneously being impressed by his opponent's dominance. This meant finding the exact balance between being tough enough to make the match interesting and vulnerable enough to make the outcome never seem in doubt. Promoters started requesting Lombardi specifically because they knew he understood his role completely. Other enhancement wrestlers might try to sneak in extra offense or make matches more competitive than they were supposed to be. Lombardi never did that. His reputation spread throughout the territory system. Bookers knew that putting Steve Lombardi in the ring with their rising stars was guaranteed to make those wrestlers look better. When the call came from the WWE in 1983, Lombardi had spent years perfecting these skills. His television debut on October 29, 1983, against the Iron Sheik showed exactly what he had learned. He lost and was carried out on a stretcher, selling the Sheik's finishing move so convincingly that fans believed he was seriously injured. This wasn't just losing, this was storytelling through physical performance. The transition to national television meant bigger audiences and higher stakes, but the fundamental job remained exactly the same. Lombardi became the perfect opponent for wrestlers making their WWE debuts or establishing their characters. He worked early matches with the Killer Bees, helping establish their team dynamic. He gave ring time to the Dingo Warrior, who would later become the Ultimate Warrior, making the newcomer look dominant and dangerous. Veterans on the independent scene had shared wisdom that wrestling schools couldn't teach. They explained that enhancement wrestlers were the foundation of the entire business. Without guys willing to lose convincingly, promotions couldn't build new stars. They couldn't create the heroes that fans wanted to cheer for. Lombardi was learning that his role was actually more difficult than being the star because everything had to look effortless, while being completely selfless. Steve Lombardi had mastered the hardest skill in professional wrestling, making other people's success more important than his own. He could make anyone look good, regardless of their experience level or natural ability. He understood crowd psychology from the perspective of the underdog. Most importantly, he had learned to find satisfaction in other people's victories rather than his own. But by 1989, someone backstage was watching his work and thinking that maybe it was time for Steve Lombardi to become more than just another face in the crowd. Bobby Heenan spotted an opportunity to transform Steve Lombardi into something wrestling had never seen before. The trigger came on January 23rd during primetime wrestling, when Lombardi attacked the Red Rooster and Gorilla Monsoon in a segment that surprised everyone watching. The following week, he debuted as the Brooklyn Brawler, a character that would define the rest of his career. The concept was brilliant in its simplicity. Take this polished wrestler and make him look like he just walked off a construction site in Brooklyn. The costume told the whole story, a torn New York Yankees shirt that looked like it had been through a street fight, creating the perfect irony of a Brooklyn guy wearing the enemy's colors. The backwards baseball cap became his signature look. Clean wrestling boots were replaced with street shoes. Neat trunks gave way to regular pants. Every piece of the outfit was designed to make him look like a regular guy who happened to stumble into a wrestling ring. But the transformation went deeper than clothes. Lombardi had to learn how to move differently, talk differently, and react differently to everything that happened around him. The polite enhancement wrestler disappeared completely. In his place was a guy who looked like he might pick a fight with anyone who looked at him wrong. The character had an edge that made even his losses feel personal. Heenan's involvement gave Brooklyn Brawler something that most enhancement wrestlers never got: actual television time to develop personality. Instead of just showing up to lose, he got interview segments where he could talk about his background and his attitude. He got entrance music that fit the character. Heenan put Lombardi in televised segments and even a WrestleMania program, facing Red Rooster and Heenan himself at WrestleMania 5. The expectations were higher than anything he had faced before. Wrestling fans responded to Brooklyn Brawler in ways that surprised everyone involved. Here was someone who looked like their neighbor or co-worker, someone who seemed real in an industry full of cartoon characters. When he got beaten up, it felt like watching a regular person get destroyed by superhumans. When he managed to get some offense in, it felt like the ultimate underdog story. The character worked because it wasn't trying to be anything more than what it was. Brooklyn Brawler never claimed to be the strongest or the fastest or the most skilled. He was just supposed to be the toughest regular guy around, someone who would fight anyone regardless of the odds against him. This honesty made his inevitable losses more meaningful because fans could relate to his struggle. The authenticity came from Lombardi's own background. He really had grown up working class in Brooklyn. He understood the mentality and the attitude because he had lived it. The character wasn't an act he was putting on. It was him amplifying parts of his own personality that wrestling had never allowed him to show before. Heenan's backing eventually ended and Lombardi returned to enhancement status. But the Brooklyn Brawler stuck as his signature role. The persona had become bigger than its creator and more durable than most main event gimmicks. Even after Bobby Heenan moved on to other projects and storylines, the character remained strong because it had tapped into something real about working-class struggle and determination. Other wrestlers in the company started paying attention to what Lombardi was doing with the character. Here was proof that enhancement talent could have depth and personality beyond just being generic opponents. The Brooklyn Brawler persona showed that even wrestlers whose job was to lose could connect with audiences if they were given the right character development. The success of Brooklyn Brawler changed how WWE looked at their enhancement talent. Management realized that giving these wrestlers personalities and backgrounds could make them more valuable to television programming. Instead of just being nameless opponents, they could become characters that fans actually cared about, making their matches more interesting even when the outcomes were predetermined. This transformation proved that Steve Lombardi was more than just a skilled enhancement wrestler. He was a performer who could take creative direction and turn it into something memorable. The Brooklyn Brawler became his legacy, but more importantly, it gave him the perfect foundation for the most challenging part of his job: making wrestling's biggest stars look unstoppable while keeping audiences invested in every match. Working with different stars required Lombardi to master completely different approaches to enhancement work. With Hulk Hogan in their early 1984 angle, he had to sell power moves like the leg drop as career-ending devastation, making children believe the Hulkster possessed superhuman strength. The Ultimate Warrior presented different challenges, because Warrior was explosive but inexperienced, and Lombardi had to hide timing problems while amplifying Warrior's natural intensity. Against Bret Hart, he focused on technical sequences and submission holds, selling each armbar as if it was tearing his shoulder apart. The timing of every match was crucial. Lombardi couldn't just get beaten up for 5 minutes and lose because that would have been boring television. He had to find moments to mount comebacks that got crowds invested while never overshadowing his opponents. Against established stars, he might get 30 seconds of offense before being shut down. Against newcomers who needed more help getting over, he might get 2 or 3 minutes of looking competitive. His victories were never random, but served specific strategic purposes. His upset over Mad Dog Vachon on July 6, 1984, established that Brooklyn Brawler was still a threat early in his character development. Much later in his career, his win at TLC 2012, teaming with Miz and Alberto Del Rio, where he submitted Jinder Mahal, showed WWE still valued his to deliver surprise moments when storylines demanded them. These carefully placed wins maintained his credibility without compromising his primary enhancement role. Psychology and crowd reading were essential skills that Lombardi had perfected through years of experience. In cities where Brooklyn Brawler was popular, he could play up the underdog role more because fans wanted to see him succeed. In other markets where crowds were more interested in seeing the star, he focused purely on making his opponent look unstoppable. Every audience was different, and every match required adjustments while maintaining the same basic character traits. The year 1990 proved his value to the company when he won 35 singles matches, demonstrating that he wasn't just a random loser, but a reliable performer who could handle win streaks when storylines required them. This workload showed management's confidence in his ability to work with anyone and deliver consistent performances regardless of whether he was winning or losing. Adapting on the fly was crucial because not every opponent was prepared or experienced enough to lead the match. When working with nervous newcomers, Lombardi had to call spots quietly and guide them through their sequences while making it look like they were in complete control. When working with veterans who wanted to try new moves, he had to sell unfamiliar offense in ways that made it look devastating. The physical demands were enormous because Lombardi absorbed punishment from different opponents with different styles night after night. His body had to withstand power moves from big men, high-impact moves from cruiserweights, and technical punishment from submission specialists. Each type of offense required different selling techniques and different physical preparation. Management recognized Lombardi's value because he made their television product better without demanding attention for himself. He understood that his job was to be a supporting player in other people's stories. This mindset made him invaluable to WWE's programming, because they could count on him to make any opponent look good, regardless of the circumstances or the venue. Every loss was a performance designed to elevate someone else's career, while maintaining just enough of his own credibility to make the next match meaningful. The consistency of his work and his willingness to put others over made him one of the most trusted performers on the roster. But this reliability and skill set would eventually open doors to opportunities that went far beyond just being Brooklyn Brawler. He briefly shifted away from Brooklyn Brawler into several experimental gimmicks in 1993 to 1994. MVP debuted August 31, 1993, followed by temporarily filling in as Doink the Clown, then Kim Chi as Kamala's handler, and finally Abe Knuckleball Schwartz in August 1994 during the MLB strike. Each character was supposed to showcase different aspects of his performing abilities beyond the tough guy from Brooklyn persona that had defined his career. The MVP character was supposed to be a baseball player turned wrestler, complete with pinstripe uniform and batting helmet. This wasn't just a costume change like Brooklyn Brawler had been. This was WWE asking Lombardi to become an entirely different person with different motivations and different backstory. Management wanted to see if he could expand beyond enhancement work into something that felt more like a legitimate sports entertainer. The MVP gimmick gave Lombardi his first chance to play a character who wasn't supposed to be working class. Baseball players were athletes and celebrities, not street fighters. The persona required different body language, different speech patterns, and different reactions to everything happening around him. Instead of the aggressive posture of Brooklyn Brawler, MVP was supposed to carry himself like a professional athlete who happened to be slumming in wrestling. But audiences never connected with MVP the way they had with Brooklyn Brawler. The character felt forced and artificial in ways that the Brooklyn persona never had. Fans could tell that Lombardi was more comfortable being the tough guy than trying to portray an athlete from a completely different world. The baseball gimmick lasted only a few months before he returned to his core identity. His time as Doink the Clown created even more controversy. The original Doink had been a sinister character who terrorized other wrestlers and frightened children in the audience. When Lombardi temporarily filled in for Matt Bourne, WWE wanted to transform Doink into a friendly character who entertained kids and played harmless pranks. This change infuriated fans who preferred the evil version of the character and felt that the comedic approach ruined what had made Doink special. Playing Doink required Lombardi to learn completely new skills that had nothing to do with his wrestling background. He had to master physical comedy, work with props and special effects, and interact with children in ways that enhanced their enjoyment of the show. The clown makeup and costume hid his identity completely, allowing him to experiment with character work that was totally different from anything he had done before. Kim Chi presented yet another challenge for Lombardi's versatility. As Kamala's handler and translator, he wore elaborate African-inspired costumes and spoke in character during interviews and backstage segments. This role required him to develop speaking abilities that went far beyond the simple tough guy promos he had done as Brooklyn Brawler. Kim Chi had to explain Kamala's motivations and background while maintaining the exotic mystique that made the character work. Working with Kamala put Lombardi in storylines with established main event wrestlers like Hulk Hogan and The Undertaker. Instead of just being enhancement talent who lost quickly, he was now part of major feuds that lasted for months and appeared on pay-per-view events. The role gave him chances to show personality traits like cunning and manipulation that were completely different from his usual straightforward tough guy approach. Abe Knuckleball Schwartz became the most topical of his experimental characters when WWE capitalized on the 1994 MLB strike. Complete with face-painted baseball and carnival music, the character was designed to mock striking baseball players while positioning Lombardi as a working-class alternative to pampered athletes. The gimmick showed WWE's willingness to use current events for storylines, but like the others, it failed to generate lasting audience interest. These character experiments proved that Lombardi could adapt to different creative directions when given the opportunity, but they also revealed how difficult it was to escape a successful character typecast. None of these alternate personas generated the same audience response that Brooklyn Brawler had achieved. Each experiment did not replace his core identity. He repeatedly returned to the Brooklyn Brawler gimmick and remained primarily enhancement talent. His feuds with other lower-card performers during these periods gave him opportunities to work longer matches with more complex storytelling. Instead of 5-minute squashes, he got to develop actual rivalries with wrestlers like Barry Horowitz and Hakushi. These programs allowed him to show different aspects of his wrestling ability and prove that he could carry extended storylines when given proper creative support. Each character variation taught Lombardi new skills that made him a more complete performer, but they also confirmed that Brooklyn Brawler was his most effective and authentic persona. The experiments proved his versatility, but his survival would depend on much more than just being able to play different characters. The wrestling business was about to change in ways that would test every performer's ability to adapt. Lombardi stayed with WWE for 33 years through the Golden Era, Attitude Era, and Ruthless Aggression Era until his 2016 release, proving that adaptability and professionalism could sustain a career longer than natural talent alone. While other enhancement wrestlers from his generation disappeared during industry upheavals, he found ways to remain valuable regardless of creative direction or management changes. The Monday Night Wars created financial pressure that made every roster spot precious. WWE needed performers who could contribute without demanding significant resources or creating backstage problems. Lombardi survived because of his adaptability, backstage professionalism, and willingness to perform in multiple roles when needed. His reputation for reliability transcended individual management preferences and made him valuable to new executives who needed dependable talent. Wrestling evolved from cartoon characters toward more realistic presentations during the 1990s. Many enhancement wrestlers from the 1980s looked outdated when audiences demanded grittier storylines and authentic personalities. Lombardi adapted Brooklyn Brawler to fit whatever direction programming was heading, without abandoning the core working-class identity that made the character work originally. During the Attitude Era, his character became edgier and more aggressive while maintaining the same fundamental personality. When WWE shifted toward more athletic competition, he adjusted his wrestling style to work with faster-paced opponents and more complex match structures. The changes weren't dramatic transformations, but subtle adjustments that kept him relevant across different eras. His willingness to modify the character for topical moments showed his understanding of television needs. The brief Boston Brawler rebrand in 2005 capitalized on the Yankees-Red Sox rivalry, demonstrating that he could shift personas to fit current events when storylines demanded it. These adaptations proved his value extended beyond just being Brooklyn Brawler. Television programming became more sophisticated during the late 1990s and early 2000s. Traditional 5-minute squash matches seemed outdated compared to the dramatic presentations that fans expected. Instead of becoming obsolete, Lombardi found new ways to contribute by working as a supporting character in larger storylines rather than just being someone's weekly opponent. His experience and understanding of wrestling psychology made him valuable for establishing younger wrestlers who needed credible opponents. Management could trust him to make newcomers look good, while maintaining enough of his own credibility to make matches meaningful. This skill became increasingly important as WWE focused on developing new talent. Company loyalty became rare as wrestlers jumped between promotions for better opportunities. Lombardi's decision to stay with WWE through good times and bad demonstrated commitment that management appreciated. His loyalty wasn't just about gratitude for employment, but about understanding his role within the organization and accepting it completely. The wrestling industry became more corporate and business-focused during the 2000s. Wrestlers were expected to be professional employees rather than independent contractors who did whatever they wanted. Lombardi's approach aligned perfectly with this corporate mentality. He understood chain of command, followed directions without question, and maintained professional standards regardless of circumstances. Economic downturns and changing television landscapes forced WWE to make difficult financial decisions throughout the 2000s. Enhancement wrestlers like Lombardi were cost-effective because they required smaller financial commitments while still contributing to programming. His survival through multiple waves of roster cuts proved that consistency could be more valuable than natural athletic ability or political connections. Wrestlers with better physiques and more charisma found themselves unemployed while Lombardi continued working. His longevity became a lesson in the power of reliability over individual talent. The industry respected workers who understood their place and performed their roles without ego or complaint. His career demonstrated that showing up prepared and doing your job professionally could sustain a wrestling career longer than pursuing individual glory or recognition. While other wrestlers fought for better positions or complained about creative decisions, he accepted whatever role he was given and performed it without question. But all those years of professional reliability and consistent performance were building towards something nobody expected. Sometimes in wrestling, the most unlikely performers get their moment when circumstances align in ways that surprise everyone involved. The September 22, 1997 Battle Royal at Madison Square Garden wasn't supposed to matter. These matches were usually filler content designed to give multiple wrestlers television time without advancing any major storylines. Steve Lombardi had been in dozens of these over the years, always eliminated early to make room for more important performers. But on this night, something went wrong with the script. One by one, established wrestlers got eliminated until only Brooklyn Brawler remained standing in the ring. The crowd reaction was unlike anything Lombardi had experienced in his 14-year WWE career. The Madison Square Garden audience realized they were witnessing something unprecedented. Here was the guy who lost every week suddenly earning a shot at the WWE Championship. Fans who had watched him get destroyed by everyone from Hulk Hogan to The Undertaker were now cheering for him like he was their childhood hero. The atmosphere was electric with possibility and disbelief. Backstage, WWE officials had to protect the title while honoring the Battle Royal outcome. Shawn Michaels was the established champion at the peak of his abilities, having defeated legends like Bret Hart and The Undertaker to reach the top of the company. The build-up to the championship match created an unusual dynamic that WWE had never dealt with before. They couldn't book Brooklyn Brawler as a legitimate threat to Michaels without undermining years of enhancement work. But they also couldn't completely dismiss him without making the Battle Royal victory seem meaningless. When November 15, 1997 arrived, Madison Square Garden was packed with fans who understood they were about to witness something unique in wrestling history. This wasn't a typical championship match between two main event stars. It was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for someone who had spent his entire career making other people look good. Brooklyn Brawler walked out to New York, and the crowd energy was different from normal title matches because everyone knew this was probably his only chance at glory. Shawn Michaels entered the match facing a challenge he had never encountered before. How do you work with someone whose job has always been to lose to you? Michaels was known for his ability to carry opponents to great matches, but this situation required something different. He had to make Brooklyn Brawler look credible without making himself look vulnerable. The champion had to thread the needle between respect and dominance. The match began with Lombardi showing more aggression and confidence than fans had ever seen from him. Instead of being intimidated by the moment, he wrestled like someone who belonged in the main event. His offense looked more impactful than usual because Michaels was selling it like legitimate threats to his championship reign. For the first time in years, Brooklyn Brawler's punches and kicks seemed dangerous rather than desperate. Reports note Lombardi dominated portions of the match for roughly 15 minutes. Michaels worked the match like a master storyteller, giving Lombardi extended periods of offense while showing just enough vulnerability to make the crowd believe an upset was possible. When Brooklyn Brawler connected with his signature moves, Michaels sold them like championship-ending threats. The crowd responded to every near fall with genuine excitement because they wanted to see the impossible happen. Something magical was happening in Madison Square Garden. Fans who had come to see Shawn Michaels retain his championship were now emotionally invested in Brooklyn Brawler's chances of winning. Every time Lombardi mounted a comeback, the crowd noise grew louder. Every time Michaels took control, fans booed with real disappointment. The enhancement wrestler had become the people's champion for one night. The near falls generated authentic drama that surprised everyone in the building. When Brooklyn Brawler got 2 counts on the champion, fans jumped to their feet, believing they might witness the greatest upset in wrestling history. These weren't polite reactions to predetermined spots. The audience was genuinely invested in seeing this career underdog achieve the impossible against all odds. Michaels retained after interference from China and Triple H, but Lombardi had delivered a sustained, surprisingly competitive showing. The victory felt different from Michaels' other championship defenses because he had shown genuine respect for a veteran wrestler while proving his own abilities as a performer who could elevate anyone to main event level. Brooklyn Brawler had lost again, but this defeat felt like a victory because he had proven he belonged on the biggest stage. The match became a defining moment that showed enhancement talent could rise to any occasion when given the opportunity. But as the years passed and his body began showing the wear of 3 decades in the ring, management would discover that Lombardi's real value extended far beyond what he could do between the ropes. WWE management recognized that Lombardi's decades of experience made him perfect for developing the next generation of talent. The company was expanding its developmental system and needed experienced hands who understood every aspect of professional wrestling. Lombardi transitioned to a road agent role, helping structure matches and mentor new talent while continuing sporadic in-ring appearances. His job was to watch rehearsals and offer suggestions about timing, psychology, and storytelling. The skills he had developed from years of enhancement work translated perfectly to helping newcomers avoid the mistakes that could end careers before they started. Teaching wrestlers how to lose properly was more complicated than most people understood. Lombardi worked with developmental talent who had been stars in college athletics or independent promotions. These athletes were used to winning and competing for themselves. They had to learn to suppress the winning instinct and focus entirely on making their opponents successful. Young wrestlers struggled with the concept that losing could be more valuable than winning. They wanted to show their athletic abilities and impress management with spectacular moves. Lombardi explained that flashy offense meant nothing if it didn't serve the story of the match. His job was to break down their egos and rebuild them as team players who understood their role in the larger entertainment product. Developmental territories became Lombardi's classroom. He worked with future stars before they reached television, helping them understand crowd psychology and character development. These wrestlers needed to learn how to connect with audiences emotionally, rather than just impressing them athletically. Lombardi taught them that wrestling success came from making people care about what happened to you in the ring. The respect he had earned throughout WWE made him an effective communicator between management and talent. Younger wrestlers trusted his advice because he had survived in the business for decades without political games or backstage manipulation. Management valued his opinions because they knew he understood both the creative and business sides of professional wrestling better than most performers ever would. His credibility with top talent became evident when Dwayne Johnson praised him in his autobiography as a stand-up worker who exemplified professionalism. Lombardi also worked behind the camera on John Cena's WWE.com 5 Questions segments, showing the trust that both management and main event stars placed in his abilities. These relationships demonstrated that his influence extended far beyond the developmental system. Evaluating new talent required different skills than performing in the ring. Lombardi learned to identify wrestlers who possessed the intangible qualities needed for long-term success. Natural athletic ability was common among developmental wrestlers. Mental toughness and the willingness to sacrifice individual glory for company success were much rarer traits that determined who would make it to the main roster. His eye for talent wasn't based on impressive physical specimens or spectacular finishing moves. Lombardi looked for wrestlers who understood storytelling, who could adapt their performances to different opponents and situations. He valued performers who showed up prepared, took direction without complaining, and genuinely cared about improving their craft rather than just advancing their careers. The developmental system taught Lombardi that enhancement wrestlers often developed the most complete understanding of wrestling fundamentals. They had to master every aspect of match psychology, because their job required constant adaptation to different opponents and styles. Main event wrestlers could rely on their established characters and signature moves. Enhancement talent had to be versatile enough to work with anyone effectively. Working with future WWE stars gave Lombardi a different kind of satisfaction than his in-ring career had provided. Instead of making established performers look good, he was now helping create the next generation of wrestling talent. The wrestlers he trained would go on to headline WrestleMania and win championships that had always been beyond his own reach. His backstage contributions extended his impact far beyond what he could have achieved as an active wrestler. The techniques and psychology he taught influenced dozens of performers who became major stars. His knowledge lived on through every wrestler he helped develop, multiplying his influence throughout the entire wrestling industry. He remained on WWE payroll as a road agent and producer for years before his 2016 release, and he still works the independents as of 2024. Management had recognized that Lombardi's value to the company had evolved beyond just his in-ring contributions. He became a crucial part of WWE's talent development system, helping ensure that future stars understood the fundamentals of professional wrestling before they reached television. But despite all these contributions and decades of loyal service, questions remained about whether the wrestling industry truly valued the work he had dedicated his life to. Recognition for his contributions has become a contentious topic among wrestling fans and industry observers. Steve Lombardi has never been inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame, despite 3 decades of loyalty and service to the company. His absence from the hall raises questions about how WWE values different types of contributions to the wrestling business. WWE's Hall of Fame has recognized non-champion contributors in the past, while Lombardi, despite long service and backstage roles, remains uninducted. WE has inducted announcers, referees, and backstage personnel who never wrestled a single match. These people earned recognition for their behind-the-scenes work and contributions to the wrestling industry. Lombardi wrestled thousands of matches over 30 years, helped develop countless wrestlers, and became one of the most recognizable faces in WWE history. yet he remains excluded from the company's most prestigious honor. The Hall of Fame selection process seems to favor wrestlers who held championships or headlined major events. Main event stars like Hulk Hogan and Stone Cold Steve Austin clearly deserve their places in wrestling history. But this focus on championship success ignores the wrestlers who made those champions look good in the first place. Without enhancement talent like Brooklyn Brawler, WWE could never have built the stars that fans remember most fondly. Lombardi himself has spoken about deserving Hall of Fame consideration, believing he contributed more than many inducted stars. After 33 years with WWE, Lombardi was released in May 2016 and still wrestles on the independents as of 2024. Behind every wrestling legend stands someone like Lombardi who chose sacrifice over personal glory, making Hulk Hogan stronger and Ultimate Warrior more dominant. His story asks a larger question about how the business rewards service. Do people like Brooklyn Brawler deserve Hall of Fame recognition? Let us know what you think in the comments. Like and subscribe for more deep dives into wrestling's overlooked figures.